How much is this going to cost the industry then to decarbonize?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Tom. But yeah, as you said, it'll cost about $5 trillion, according to McKinsey, and that's a lot of money. Most of it's going to be spent on producing sustainable aviation fuels and also to produce the renewable energy that will be required for synthetic fuels. Ultimately, a lot of that money is gonna fall to airlines, and then that will be passed on to customers.
I mean, so an obvious question, before we get to the cost to customers, and there is going to be a cost, what is the ability for the aviation industry to actually absorb this $5 trillion cost? We talked about the fact they've come through the pandemic. Some of these airlines got state backing and funding temporarily. At least they've managed to shore up their balance sheets, many of them, after the shock of the pandemic. Do they have the wherewithal? Do they have the dry powder to be able to afford this?
Right. Well, airlines say they can't do it alone. The current sustainable fuels that are made out of waste oils and fats cost about 2 to 4 times as much as conventional jet fuel does. And then once you get to synthetic fuels, that's going to be 6 to 8 times the cost. So the airlines they're lobbying governments for subsidies. They've had some success with that in the U.S. They're also investing in biofuels so that they can increase the supplies and bring down the costs. But ultimately, a lot of this is going to be borne by passengers.
So, yeah, what is the cost then for you and I, for the passenger?
Well, that's a good question. So there's some estimates out there, and of course, this is these are early days, so we don't know exactly. But there's some estimates out there for example, for a short trip, say Zurich to Amsterdam round trip. In 2050, the extra added cost would be somewhere between $10 and $25. And then if you go on a longer trip, like say New York to London or Paris, you're talking about $150 for a round trip in added costs on top of inflation and everything else that's
okay. So that's an additional cost, maybe for a long haul flight of about $150 US dollars.
Yeah,
some would make the argument, obviously, that's a relatively small price to pay for flying a green flight, or at least a relatively certainly a flight that has a reduced carbon footprint. What is the timing of this? When does this? You talk about 2050. Yeah. Is that this is a long time frame? Where is the aviation industry in terms of addressing this and moving towards this?
Well, right now you're starting to see the cost even coming down to customers. So, for example, airlines like United are asking customers to pay a voluntary surcharge, anywhere from $3 a flight on up. But Air France KLM here in Europe, there are mandates that are already taking effect, and Air France KLM is charging anywhere from €2 to 24 euros for flights out of Amsterdam or from Paris.
But where are we on the technology? I mean, how advanced is this technology? How realistic is it? When are we going to start to see planes fueled by biofuels? Well,
the technology is there. This is all doable in terms of, just purely the science. The big thing is the cost and the organization around it. Getting everybody to rally around sustainable aviation fuels, that in and of itself was a big hurdle.
Does the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, does that feed into that? Does it give airlines in the US a head start?
Well, the airlines say yes. Now, of course, it's good for them because having a subsidy of anywhere from $1.50 to $1.75 per gallon of fuel really helps them. Takes the sting out of the cost. So they say yes. There's a whole nother argument that says that the mandates that Europe is putting in place are really what's going to be required in order to make this all really happen.